Hello and welcome to the Shepheard-Walwyn podcast series. My name is Jonathan Brown. Shepheard-Walwyn is a campaigning book publisher based in London, England. Our purpose is to uncover and promote new ideas to society's oldest problems. And whilst our specialty is ethical economics, something Anthony Werner, our driving force for over 40 years, has pioneered, we have branched out over the years to other related areas such as the environment and the lives and works of society's change agents. These podcasts promote ideas we're convinced can actually help us build a better society for all of us. So have a listen and be sure to share with your friends if you like them, but also tell us what you think. These are debates we all need to be part of. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. This week we're speaking with one of our most popular authors, economist and investor Phil Anderson. Phil wrote The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking in 2008, which documented the boom-bust cycles in the US land and property values over the last 250 years. Phil is an in-demand speaker on the international conference circuit, and he spends his time travelling between Europe, Asia and his home country of Australia. He's also the founder of Property Sharemarket Economics, a subscription service for investors looking for advice on global market movements. Phil, welcome to the podcast. First of all, just for people who don't know you, so the book on The Secret Life is about the American land and property market and how it moves in approximately 18-year cycles. Before we get into the ideas around that, I wonder if you could just tell us just what brought you to that area, how you work, what work was it your work, was it a hobby, what was it that got you interested?
Well, I should say as well, when we did the reprint of the book, we added the word banking to the name because after the downturn of 2008 or so, everybody blamed the banks, and that's typical of one reason I got into things, because when I was much younger, I took the time to travel right around the world, and I made a pledge to myself that I wasn't coming home until I actually understood how the world worked. And one thing led to another. I ended up in Nepal and then China and then India. And I'm very happy to say that I didn't quite get how the world worked when I came back, but I knew I had roughly the answer, and I knew the answer resolved in land. And so I did some political stuff, and in Australia back then, we're talking the late 1980s now. I stood for Parliament, and when you stand for Parliament, you get lots and lots of stuff that people send you. And I got a little book sent to me by a group, an unheard of group called the Henry George League, and they sent me a little pamphlet about Winston Churchill and some of the things Winston Churchill had to say. Back in those days, I was a bit anarchistic, really. I still am. I'm not a big rule follower. I don't think society has to have all the rules that we've got. And but the reason we have rules is because nobody's accepting responsibility for their action, of course, Jonathan, as you know. So I got this book, and I was never going to read Winston Churchill because I thought he was a right-wing lunatic, and so I threw it out. But somehow the book just fell out of another book I was reading, so clearly I didn't throw it out so well. So I thought that was a bit synchronistic, so I read it, and it was Winston Churchill's explanation of his government's effort to remove a toll on the bridge over the Thames. And Winston Churchill and those in government at the time, the Liberals, they genuinely had a sympathetic view for some of the poorer people, and they removed the toll on that bridge, people crossing over from one side to the other. And they found just a few weeks later that the rents that people were paying had risen by the amount of the toll that was taken off. And that's a little story of one of Churchill used to give to his constituents. And there it was. I saw eternity in an instant, really. It became obvious, if it wasn't already, that it was a land question about the way the world worked. And then I had my book. Then I knew after that revelation, I knew what I had to do, and that's been the sole function and purpose of what I've done since I was about 24. I'm very thankful for that moment, because it gives great purpose to your life, and I think one of the keys of why we're here is to find out why you're here. So I'm thankful for that, and the book's the result, really, of what I saw in my travels, and then how it panned out. So it's been good.
And your family was in owned. It was in a business that had a lot of real estate.
Yes, well, still do. That was one thing that led to it as well. There was, we were having in the very early 1990s downturn was probably most severe in Melbourne, Australia, of all places, which is where our family had our business. Our business was in ladies' lingerie, of all things, and embroidery. So we had to have answers because, as it turned out, the business that we ran, the family business, tended to do quite well in downturns because women have tended to buy more lingerie and lipstick in downturns, which is good for us. But we had, because it was good for us, it kept our bank account liquid, and the banks in the very early 1990s noticed that the banks, one or two of the banks in Australia were bankrupt. They don't tell you that in the public, but we know they were because a number of bank managers in those banks approached us to try and take off some of their surplus property if we could maintain the loans. I won't go into all the details, but we managed that okay and built a bit more of our portfolio. But it led to all sorts of questions about could we afford it, what was coming next, was it possible to even know what was coming next, and then had to work out what that meant and what we could do with that information. And it was just as those questions were being asked, I had begun to read Fred Harrison's The Power in the Land, and as you know, Jonathan, because I know you've read that as well, it was an unbelievable book because it came out in 1983 and had forecast 7 years in advance exactly what we were seeing now. And that chimed with me as well because I did economics at school. That was my favourite subject. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to work out how this works. That's the major reason why I went overseas. I came back with the basic question about real estate and land. And it just, one thing led to another. I can see sometimes you wonder whether you're meant to be in certain places, and it all came together. And from there it wasn't hard to start researching and put two and two together, and you could see how it all worked. And I was delighted that then I'd got onto land and Churchill and Henry George and then Fred Harrison, and then I could see once I'd put Fred Harrison's book into my head, I could see that there was probably a business here for me because, as I discovered in the family business, I'm probably unemployable. I'm not exactly a person that you can always tell what to do. I like being in charge of my own destiny, and I do like to make the decisions that I'm concerned in with regards to my own work. The knowledge from Fred gave me a clear ability to be able to then work for myself and start my own stuff, which I went ahead and did. Again, which I'm thankful that came about. The idea of the book was never, at that stage, 1991, I didn't have an idea of a book. Just to be able to run my own business and teach people how to understand the cycles as such. I didn't actually even start with real estate first. I started with my favourite person, Nikolai Kondratiev, who I'd been researching for years. Even at school, I'd made some stuff with long-term economic stuff on prices, in particular gold. I remember must have been 13 or 14, I think, and I was already looking at stock markets and prices. The first stock I studied was Renison Goldfield. I think it was 20 cents, and some days it was 22, some days 25, other days went down at 18. I just thought to myself, if I could sell at 20, buy at 20 and sell at 22, I'd never have to work again. Of course, it's not as easy as that, but so I already knew and was aware of Kondratiev and the long commodity cycle, 30 years up, 30 years down of basic commodities. So it wasn't hard for me to then start the business and then incorporate real estate cycles into that. I discovered that you can basically get the 3 real estate cycles in the K-wave, the Kondraty F commodity price, and I was off and running and talking about cycles and doing what I love. I discovered it with some of the books I've been reading. It's not it's all very well to try and be passionate about what you do, but in the finish, to really be able to work for yourself properly, you've got to be able to monetize your passion. Fortunately, I've been able to do that so far.
And that's through investing and trading and.
Well, it's just about understanding how the world works, how the economic side of stuff works. Once you see that there is a rhythm to a lot of the activity that takes place in economics, the bigger price movements first of all, and then once you see the rhythm with the real estate cycle, and then of course you get to the aspect of where true power lies, which is being control of rent, or economists call it economic rent. Once you see that, and once you see, as I explain in the book, once you see that when the economic rent is enclosed, you must get a real estate cycle. Then it just allows you to see all through the nonsense of economics, the stupidity of politicians, why we get the governments that we do, why we get tyrants, why we get dictators. It's just so easy to see through all of that once you see the cycle, and once you see the real estate cycle, how it turns and why it must continue to turn when we enclose the economic rent. That's the whole thing. It just puts it all together. So I thought I could run a business along those lines, explaining it to people.
So I know that the people that already follow you will understand clearly what enclosing the rent means. I just wonder if you could tell us first of all what is rent, as you define it, because obviously we pay rent on houses, but I know that's not exactly what you mean. And also then what's enclosing the rent?
Well, it's like riding a bike. It's very easy to do once you get it. But you've actually got to get on the bike and work out how to balance. But economic rent as such, let me give you a very, very easy example, and it just concerns something I put in the book. It just concerns the people who get onto the streets and sell a magazine called The Big Issue. When that first came out in the United States, I think it was first, probably even San Francisco, it was a guy who wanted to do something for all the homeless people. So he said, well, let's get them selling a magazine. They can sell it on the streets. So they produced a magazine. He gave it to the homeless people to sell on the streets. Naturally, those people selling this Big Issue, they were very quick to realise that you can sell more copies if you're in the CBD or on a street corner where more people walk past you than the amount of copies you might sell if you're standing outside your own house in a neighbourhood that doesn't have a lot of people walking down. So it was discovered that some of the sellers started to fight over the best locations. And so it's that willingness of people to pay for the better locations that gives rise to what is called in economic terms economic rent. It's just simply the amount of money over and above the wage that people will earn from the best location. Another way to put it, I guess, is what Winston Churchill was trying to suggest, and he was trying to show people that at the end of the day, it is the rent we pay that will take all the gains of society. So when his government took the toll off the bridge, landlords were very quick to realise that people would have an extra sixpence in their pocket every week, so that's what they put the rent up by. And because the best locations were near the access point and the bridge. So the rents went up. So that's basically what we're trying to talk about, is locational value, the amount of money that people are willing to pay over and above what they could earn from what might be called the margin, which is where they just can sell enough magazines to basically make a living.
And enclosing the rent?
Well, enclosure means that historically, particularly if we go back to London of the 13 and 1400s, historically, most people, or a person living in a village, could, if they wanted to, go to the commons and do some farming or hunt or fish, because it was commons land. But then, once Henry VIII took over and he sold off the land for the monasteries and took it all for himself and his own bishops and cronies, it was sold off and fenced, which meant that if you wanted access to that land that formerly was commons that you could walk on at will, it had now been privatised, bought and sold, so you had to pay somebody for the right to go and trespass on that former commons land. And now it's just considered normal that we buy and sell all sorts of bits and pieces of parcels and land and everything else, and whereas it really isn't so normal, but today it's considered normal. When you're born, you have to buy your access, and that's what we do. That enclosure started and still does cause the turning of the real estate cycle. When you get that, when you see it, it's blindingly obvious. That's what causes the cycle. That is the cycle. And the cycle will continue to turn whilst that happens. And of course, as I detail in the book, it's one of the first things I say. The book came out in 2008 and 2009, but I tell people quite clearly right at the start, the cycle will go global. Russia, China, India will join the cycle more and more, as they have, and this will create even bigger cycles in the 21st century. We can see now that after 2008, I said in the book that the next cycle, the one we're in now, will be even bigger than the last one. Look what we've got. Land prices have doubled since then. The debt has gone just right over the top. Debt for private enterprise, debt for government, and here we are in the second half of another cycle. It's all playing out.
So looking at the book then. It's quite a weighted tome. I think it's just under 500 pages, I think, isn't it?
40 something pages.
440 pages. So, what was your process of writing the book?
The book came out. It was easy. There wasn't anything tough about the book. The book had to come out. It was there. Although,
what does that mean? So it was.
Well, I'd been writing for my subscribers. I'd been teaching. Okay. I'd been teaching people right through from 1991, when I first went into my own business in a place called Ross House there in Flinders Lane, Melbourne, and my small little place is still there, although I've expanded internationally somewhat since then in a few different places now where I've got staff. I was already writing stuff. I was busy. Gosh, things have changed. I started off the first business. It was explaining the Kondrati F wave to commodity companies, Western Mining, some of the banks, National Bank. They had their headquarters next to mine in those days, and in those days, the big corporations used to have a library. So I wrote to all the libraries and explained to them what I did, and it was necessary. They should take out a subscription, and they did. I was very fortunate that started me off really with all those subscriptions to basically it was the Kondrati wave in the beginning, and then I added the real estate cycle. So I was already writing for my subscribers. So the book was sort of, without thinking of it as a book, it was coming out in bits and pieces. Then of course Mark Andreessen, he put out Netscape, which Microsoft eventually bought, and that put pictures onto the internet in 1995. I had a website suddenly. People, I was one of the first people in Australia probably to have a email address on my business card. Everybody used to ask me what it was meant for. By 1997, nobody was mailing things in the post anymore. I had email addresses for all my subscribers, and I no longer had to put stuff in an envelope. Was going out, your business changed with the whole thing. That allowed me to expand a good deal and reach more people, of course. So it was already sort of underway, and I've said this before, I was fortunate enough to have one or two subscribers come to me. Gabby was one, long time subscriber. She said, "Phil, you got to write a book," and I'm eternally grateful for that idea being put into my head, because by 2004 I had enough that was really all there. It was just a matter of putting it together and then getting it into a document that made a bit of sense, then having somebody look at it. I was fortunate to get an editor, Jean here, that was then able to nicely, relentlessly criticise me, because she said I'd written the book as though I was presenting it, and that's not how people read it. So I then had to go away and redo the whole thing just about, and then I had a couple of other people suggest different format changes, and then one or two people suggested put it into 3 sequences, current, the present, the past and the future and stuff, and I was very happy with it overall when it came out, and I'd had good feedback. So the book was progressively put together, but of course, as you know, it's the first one's always a labour of love in a way, and it took me 10 years in the finish to actually have it all properly put together. But I was very happy how it came out, because it's not, 440 pages. It's not a difficult read. It's much of its history, and I had one person described it as a page turner even. So that's a history book like that. That's not a bad effort, really.
What was looking at that process of so you're writing regularly for your subscribers, sharing ideas and seeing what resonates and what doesn't, I guess improving your communication, and then you've got your 3 to 4 years of intensive from 2004 I guess to 2007, wouldn't it really, looking at publication. What were some of the most surprising things you learned in writing your book?
I learned one basic thing from all of that, from all the history, especially the US history. I learned that every cycle found a way to complete. That's what I learned. And that gave me great confidence to be able to forecast after 2007 what would happen. So 2009, 2010, 2011, you may recall when absolutely everybody was forecasting the end of the world. Currencies would collapse, there'd be new currencies, that America would never recover, that Europe would implode, that the euro would disintegrate. I could see that the real estate cycle was going to recover and find a way to go on to bigger and better things. I could see eventually that would be put in the past. I wasn't able to say, that exactly how that would happen and what sort of people would come along. I just knew that it was going to happen, and it will happen. It will continue to happen. The real estate cycle just finds a way to complete, and of course, one of the biggest factors in why that is so is the banks. The banks have now found a way to collect the rent. It's rent in parlance. It's economic rent, really, the official term. The banks have found a way to securitise and mortgage that, such that they're now the owners of much of the rent. They're never going to give that up without a fight, and it guarantees that the cycle's going to complete. There's just absolutely no doubt about this. The biggest surprise for me, once I learnt that the cycle is definitely going to repeat. The cycle just finds a way to do that. The biggest surprise for me is why so few people get to see it, and why people can't get their head around it.
Right. And the people who do tend to get their head around it, your ideal readers, then, who are they, and what do they look for in the book? What draws them to it?
Oh, they come from all backgrounds. I get finance people, obviously, that really do seriously want to make an intensive effort to try to understand, to get to the bottom of things. I might get people on the left of the spectrum that just simply want to understand stuff. I also get other people that want to actually do something with it, as such, from a causal point of view, and actually try and understand how easy it would be to actually shift the tax base from the stupid system we've got now, and actually use the immense economic rent that's available to all people, to actually start to use that as a fund for people to collect some sort of citizens' dividend, and then you could completely eliminate all taxes on labour and all taxes on business. I would have thought that's an idea that's self-evident, but apparently not. So I get all sorts of people that come to me with from all sorts of different aspects. I wouldn't say I've got one average person as such. I do get a good deal of feedback from it, though, and I'm grateful for the feedback. What makes me most happiest is when I hear from people that say, they say, Phil, your book has allowed me to take all the stress out of my life. I don't have to worry now about how the system functions. I can see through it, and since now I've got a larger time frame to operate in and be more certain about what's going to happen, it just gives me much more ability to stop worrying about my investments and actually give me the ability to do some long-term planning. They're the people that make me happiest in one sense, because that's what I've been able to do. It's one reason I wrote the book. It was just to allow people to take back control of their understanding of things and not get stressed, not worry about why things happen as they do, and why politicians do what they do, and why we've got such stupid taxes and everything else. So they can work through that system, they can see through it, they can work around it, and say, I get much longer time frame. I don't need to worry about what's coming next, because I've got a very good idea of what's coming next. I had a lot of my subscribers, hundreds. We all knew that. We all had a great idea, the way things were going, that the economy would peak in 2019. It wasn't hard to work out, yes. And then you just wait for whatever might cause the downturn, which came along on time, 2020. You can plan for that now. Now all the same people, and I hope that more that join me through my website at Property Sharemarket Economics. You can plan for 2026 and beyond now. It's just something that's not hard to do. Of course, obviously, it's not guaranteed 120% set in stone, but everything you see around you, as you know, is really setting us up for the stuff that's coming. And it just takes all your stress away from all that planning. You can just give yourself some guidance and an allowance and get into it.
So what are you working on at the moment?
Well, I've been right at the moment. I've got an update coming. It's going to be a little ebook that I want to get out, hopefully in the next few months. Bringing the book, it'll be sort of like an additional chapter. I don't really want to do another hard copy book adding to it as such. We'll probably do a chapter that's an ebook and add to that. I've also got some stuff now that my passion now is really what's called a citizen's dividend. I really I can take that back even one step further. It's not just a citizen's dividend. My passion now would be the complete, utter and absolute total elimination and abolition of government. That would be that is my passion, and you do that through the implementation of a citizen's dividend. It was a very good mate of mine, Jeff Smith, in the US, in Portland. I think he's still there. He wanders around a bit. who coined the term citizens' dividend actually, and it's a great term. It's a payment that a communal fund could make to a citizen yearly. Alaska does it. All Alaskans receive about $1,500 US from their Alaska City Council, which they can use as they want. I show in my citizens' dividend stuff. There's a Facebook page if people want to get to it. I show them how that the economic rent can be collected via citizens' dividend. When you do that, you could make the world much more local. You can collect the economic rent in a local fashion, distribute it back to small locations and regions, and then people can be responsible for themselves as to what they do with that. They don't need a government making laws and telling them what to do all the time. And that's been a long time thing of mine. I found, I spent in my very early 20s, I took 2 years out and I travelled right around the world. And everything I saw, just about all your people you spoke to, everywhere, it didn't matter what country they were in, all they really wanted was to raise a family on a small plot of land with a nice house, free of interference. They didn't want to be told by government what to do. And they just liked living in small communities as such, in regions where they found they could associate with people. It's the same all over the world. And here we are at the moment. You've got threats from everywhere, from big business owning. We've probably got 8, 9, 10 major corporations own all our food supply now. We've got just major banks that pretty much own the central banks. We've got larger and larger corporations now buying thousands, if not millions, of homes, and then list on the stock market. They're collecting the rent. Is that the way forward that the majority of people really want? And I don't think it is. People I talk to, they don't want to see big corporations owning their lives. They certainly don't want the intrusions now that the government taking over the internet with facial recognition and being trolled and trawled and all your business known everywhere now, and it's going on and on and on. I know, Jonathan, maybe I'm getting too old, but that's a large part of my time spent now. It's just highlighting to people society does not need government to function. It simply doesn't. But this idea now, it just seems for most people so far-fetched. We just seem so enamoured and our shoulders bearing, carrying the weight of government on us now. They don't seem to recognise and get that we don't need government the way it is these days. We don't need it to actually function properly. But on the other hand, people would have to understand that the communal fund is the citizens' dividend, and it comes from funded out of economic rent. So they're going to have to give up some of their property speculation to actually make that happen. And of course, the big boys, they sit in the House of Lords and they own the big corporations, and the major banks. They're not going to give that up without in a hurry. But part of the education, once people get to see it, though, it's just put it another way. Society today economics today, society in general, it's built on scarcity. Not only scarcity, everything you see in the media now and the current, all the COVID stuff, it's built on fear. I try to tell people, you don't need to be part of that. Base your life in abundance. That's part of what I was trying to write with in the book, The Secret Life. Get to understand the system, work out how it functions, and you can live your life in abundance. It's just so important that people do that, and I'm hopeful that more and more people will continue to do that and eventually see the light and start to push for less and less government intrusion into their lives. But the way society's winding up at the moment, we're going in the completely wrong direction. So anyway, that's my bit on the whole thing.
Great. And where can people find out more?
Well, you can find out more at Shepheard-Walwyn, which is the publisher of the book, and you can find out more at Property Sharemarket Economics, which is the service I run with Akil and Kathy and a few others. Or they can, of course, go to the Facebook page, Citizens Dividend Facebook page. They can get me on there too, and I encourage them to do that. You'll start seeing the world in a completely different way. That'd be fabulous.
Well, Phil, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you very much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. Now, if you haven't already got a copy of Phil's book, you can find it at our website, Shepheard-Walwyn.com, and from all good bookshops. So please check it out, and also look out for a series of chats with Phil, exploring his ideas and his work more deeply. Thank you. Until next time, keep reading. Thank you for listening to the Shepheard-Walwyn podcast. To explore these ideas further, be sure to visit our website, www.Shepheard-Walwyn.com, and join our mailing list for news and special offers. Check out our authors and buy the books to learn more, and you can also find us on social media. Links are also on the website. And if you like the podcast, please head over to iTunes or Spotify to give us a review. It's surprisingly helpful in getting the ideas out there. So until next time, keep reading